The night was calm in Delhi, but inside the grand hall the air was alive with whispers and expectations. Leaders, students, and thinkers had gathered, waiting for the moment when Sundar Pichai would speak. He was not just the CEO of Google in their eyes. He was a man who had walked from a small house in Chennai to the highest stage of the world. Every face in the room carried a silent question. What will he say tonight? Sundar stood quietly before stepping onto the stage. His hands were steady, but inside he felt the weight of memories pressing on him. He remembered the small room where his family once lived, the faint light of a single bulb, the long walks to school, and the old scooter his father rode every day. As he looked at the crowd, the image of his father's tired but proud face flashed before him. He knew this moment was not just his. It belonged to every sacrifice his family made. When Sundar began speaking, his voice was soft, almost humble. Yet in the silence of the hall, every word carried a power. "I want to start not with success, but with gratitude," he said. The audience leaned forward. They expected stories of technology, leadership, and global business. Instead, Sundar spoke of his father's lessons, his mother's kindness, and the values that shaped him more than any degree or title. The hook was clear. This was not going to be another speech about ambition. This was about something deeper, something human. He described how his father once gave up his own dream of studying abroad so he could provide for the family. He remembered how his mother would sit awake during the hot summer nights, fanning the children so they could sleep while she stayed restless. "Without them," Sundar said, "I would not be here. True greatness does not begin with achievement. It begins with gratitude." The room grew silent, the kind of silence that carried weight. Narendra Modi, who was sitting among the guests, lifted his eyes toward Sundar. Modi had heard many speeches in his life, but in Sundar's words, there was no pride, only humility. There was no desire to impress, only the desire to honor. It reminded him of his own journey, the nights selling tea, the long path of resilience. But just as the audience was sinking into the warmth of Sundar's words, a twist came. Sundar paused, his eyes distant, as though remembering something painful. "There was a moment when I almost gave up," he confessed. "A time when I thought dreams were too far, and life was too heavy." The crowd stiffened. This was not the story of a smooth climb. This was a confession of struggle, of almost losing hope. He spoke of the rejection letters, the loneliness of being away from home, the pressure of expectations. "But in those dark nights," he said, "I remembered my father's voice. He always told me, 'Son, even if the world does not see your worth today, never stop building it. Your time will come.'" Sundar's voice broke slightly at this memory, and many in the audience felt their own eyes grow wet. Narendra Modi leaned forward, his hands clasped. He had always believed that strength was not in titles, but in resilience. Here was a man proving that belief in front of everyone. The suspense built as Sundar continued. "Tonight," he said, "I am not here to tell you about technology or leadership. I am here to tell you that gratitude can carry you when nothing else does. Gratitude is the bridge that takes you from despair to hope." People exchanged glances. This was not just a speech. It was a mirror to their own lives. The students thought of their parents working late hours. The leaders thought of their humble beginnings. The workers thought of their silent sacrifices. And then came the moment that would be remembered. Sundar folded his hands, bowed his head, and said, "Everything I have, everything I am, is because of the love and sacrifice of others. For me, true greatness is not in standing tall, but in bowing low with gratitude." Narendra Modi rose slowly to his feet. The hall was still, waiting for what he would do. He looked directly at Sundar and said with a clear, strong voice, "This is true greatness. Not power, not wealth, not fame. What you showed today, Sundar, is the real greatness that India must remember." The audience erupted, not with noise but with tears, applause, and respect. They had come expecting inspiration, but what they witnessed was a lesson of life. Sundar looked down for a moment, his eyes glistening, and whispered softly to himself, "Thank you, Appa. Thank you, Amma." The applause still echoed in the hall long after Sundar finished his words. But when the noise faded, what remained was a deep silence, as if every person was left alone with their own thoughts. Sundar stepped down from the stage, and in that moment, he felt lighter. It was as if he had carried a burden for years, and tonight he had finally placed it down. Narendra Modi walked toward him. His face carried warmth, but also curiosity. "Sundar," he said gently, "you did not speak like a leader of a global company. You spoke like a son, like a man who remembers his roots. Tell me, what made you choose gratitude when the world expected you to speak about power?" Sundar paused. He looked at Modi, and then at the young students in the hall who were still staring at him with wide eyes. "Because," he said slowly, "I have seen how easy it is to forget. Success makes you forget. Money makes you forget. Even respect can make you forget. But gratitude pulls you back. It reminds you where you came from." There was weight in his words, and Modi nodded. He understood because he too had walked a long road filled with moments where forgetting would have been easy. As they spoke, one of the students, a young boy sitting in the front row, raised his hand. He was nervous, his voice shaky, but he dared to speak. "Sir, may I ask you something?" Sundar smiled kindly and gestured for him to continue. The boy said, "Sometimes we feel our parents do not understand our dreams. They push us to study. They tell us to be practical, but inside we want something else. How do we show gratitude when we feel they do not see us?" The hall grew quiet again. Sundar's eyes softened. He walked closer to the boy and said, "I know that feeling. When I wanted to study engineering, many people told me it was impossible. Even my parents worried about money. But I realized later, their worry was not to stop me. It was to protect me. Sometimes gratitude means understanding the fear behind their words. They may not always say, 'I believe in you,' but every sacrifice they make is their way of saying it." The boy's eyes filled with tears, and many in the audience nodded silently. Modi himself was moved, for he remembered his mother staying awake to feed her children, even when she had little for herself. But the night was not over. Outside the hall, cameras waited, and questions swirled. Some people wanted headlines. Some wanted controversy. A reporter shouted, "Mr. Pichai, you spoke of gratitude, but do you believe gratitude is enough in a world that runs on competition?" Sundar stopped and turned slowly. His calmness surprised everyone. "Competition may give you speed," he said, "but gratitude gives you direction. Without direction, speed only takes you faster to nowhere." His answer stunned the crowd. Even Modi smiled faintly at the simplicity and truth of it. Yet beneath the calm, Sundar's heart carried something unspoken. He remembered a night years ago when he had nearly broken under the weight of rejection. He had been in America then, far from home, with no family nearby. One letter had arrived telling him he was not selected for a program he had hoped for. He had sat alone in his small room, staring at the rejection, wondering if all his sacrifices were wasted. "I almost wrote to my father that night," Sundar whispered to himself, "telling him I wanted to come home. But then I remembered his voice. Never stop building. That night I chose not to give up." As he stood with Modi, he knew those silent struggles were the real foundation of this moment. Suddenly, Modi placed a hand on Sundar's shoulder. "You must share these hidden stories too," he said. "People think greatness is a straight road. They must know it is a path of struggle, doubt, and sacrifice. If you hide the pain, they will never learn the value of hope." Sundar looked at Modi with surprise, and then he smiled. "You are right. Greatness is not in hiding scars. It is in showing them with humility." The moment between them was powerful, almost like two different journeys meeting at the same crossroad. One had risen from the streets of Vadnagar, the other from a small home in Chennai. Both knew what it meant to struggle, to doubt, and to rise. The night ended with respect in every corner of the hall, but deep inside Sundar knew this was just the beginning. There was more to tell, more to uncover, more hearts to reach. The morning after the speech, the city was already buzzing with headlines. Newspapers carried Sundar's words. Television channels replayed the moment Modi stood up and called it true greatness. Everywhere people were talking not about business or politics, but about humility and gratitude. But while the world celebrated, Sundar sat quietly in his hotel room. He had not slept much. The cheers of the crowd had faded, but what echoed inside him were the memories of the years when no one believed in him. He thought of the narrow streets where he grew up, the crowded buses he used to take to school, and the small desk where he studied by candlelight during power cuts. He whispered to himself, "People see the success, but they do not see the nights of silence. They do not see the fear of failure that lived in me." A knock came at the door. It was one of Modi's assistants. "Sir, the Prime Minister wishes to see you," he said. Sundar nodded and followed. Inside a quiet chamber, Modi was waiting. There were no cameras, no microphones, no crowd, just two men facing each other, both carrying their own untold stories. Modi looked at Sundar with eyes that had seen hunger, loss, and long struggle. "Sundar," he said, "yesterday you spoke about gratitude. But tell me, was there ever a moment when you felt you had nothing to be grateful for?" The question struck deeply. Sundar took a breath. "Yes," he admitted softly. "When I was in America, I faced days when I felt completely alone. I had no friends nearby, no family to guide me. I worked hard, but rejection letters kept coming. There were nights when I sat on the floor of my room, asking myself if I had made a mistake leaving home. I wondered if dreams were just a burden." Modi listened carefully. "And what kept you going?" he asked. Sundar's eyes grew moist. "It was one memory. I remembered my mother placing her last gold chain on the table so my education fee could be paid. She said nothing, but her eyes told me, 'Son, I trust you.' I could not betray that trust. Even when I felt empty, I held on to gratitude. It became my strength." Modi leaned back, silent for a moment. Then he said, "That is why I called it true greatness. Because when gratitude becomes strength, no failure can destroy you." Their words carried weight, but just as the air grew calm, a sound of urgency came. One of the security staff entered with a message. "Sir, there is a group of students outside waiting since last night. They want to meet Sundar." Sundar was surprised. "Students? Why?" "They say your words gave them courage. They want to thank you," the man replied. Sundar and Modi stepped outside. A small group of young boys and girls stood near the gate, tired but hopeful. One girl stepped forward and said, "Sir, my father lost his job last year. I wanted to stop studying, but after hearing you, I feel maybe I should continue. You said gratitude gives direction. I want to believe it too." Her voice trembled, but her words cut deep into Sundar's heart. He saw himself in her, the same doubt, the same fear, the same fragile hope. He bent down, looked into her eyes, and said gently, "Never stop." Gratitude is not about waiting for life to be perfect. It is about walking even when the road is broken. Promise me you will keep walking. The girl nodded, tears streaming down her face. The others clapped softly, their eyes shining with hope. Modi watched silently, his heart heavy with memories of his own childhood. He thought of his mother washing dishes in other homes to feed the family, and of the times he wondered if dreams were meant for others, not for him. Now, seeing Sundar speak to these children, he felt the truth. Gratitude was not just an idea. It was a torch that could light the darkest paths. But the story took another turn. One of the boys in the group asked a sharp question. "Sir, what if gratitude makes us weak? What if we become so thankful that we forget to fight for more?" The crowd grew silent. Sundar looked at him carefully. "No," he said slowly. "Gratitude does not make you weak. It makes you strong enough to fight without hate. It teaches you to rise without crushing others. Strength without gratitude becomes arrogance, but strength with gratitude becomes greatness." The boy lowered his eyes, thinking hard. Sundar placed a hand on his shoulder. "Never fear gratitude. It is not the end of ambition. It is the beginning of true ambition." The students bowed respectfully and left, their hearts lighter than when they came. As Sundar and Modi stood together watching them go, Modi said quietly, "The world needs to hear this story in full, not just in speeches, but in lives. Will you share it with more people?" Sundar nodded. "Yes, because if even one person finds courage through it, then my journey has meaning." That night, Sundar sat by the window of his hotel room, staring at the city lights. He could still see the faces of the children who came to meet him. Their eyes carried both fear and hope. He kept replaying their questions in his mind. "What if gratitude makes us weak?" the boy had asked. Sundar realized that this doubt lived not only in that child, but in millions of people around the world. His phone buzzed. It was a message from his younger brother in Chennai. "Anna, everyone here watched your speech. Amma cried. She said Appa would have been proud." Sundar's eyes filled with tears. He closed his phone and whispered into the silence, "Appa, I hope I have honored you." But then another thought came, a shadow from the past. Sundar remembered a time in his college days when he had argued with his father. He had shouted in frustration, saying he was tired of sacrifices, tired of living small while others lived big. His father had listened quietly, then said only one line, "You will understand the value of small things when life tests you." At that time, Sundar did not fully understand, but now those words echoed in his heart. The next morning, Sundar was invited to a university gathering arranged by Modi's office. Thousands of young students filled the large open field. Many held notebooks, ready to write down every word. Some even carried posters of Sundar's photo, calling him an inspiration. As he walked to the stage, Sundar felt the weight of expectation. He thought to himself, "These children do not need another lecture about success. They need truth." He began with a story. "When I was in school," he said, "my father brought home a scooter. It was the only vehicle we had, and he used it to carry all of us. 5 people on one scooter. It was not comfortable, but it was love. That scooter taught me something. Life may not always give you comfort, but it will give you lessons if you choose to see them." The crowd laughed softly, but then grew quiet as his words sank in. Sundar continued, "Today I stand here not because I was the smartest, but because I learned to be grateful even for a single chance. Gratitude kept me steady when others gave up." But then, from the middle of the crowd, a young man stood up. His voice was sharp. "Sir, It is easy for you to talk about gratitude now. You are rich. You are powerful. How can you understand the pain of those who cannot even buy books? Gratitude will not fill our stomachs." The audience gasped at his boldness. For a moment the air grew heavy. All eyes turned to Sundar, waiting to see if he would be offended. But Sundar did not frown. Instead, he smiled gently and said, "You are right. Gratitude alone cannot fill an empty stomach. But without gratitude, even a full stomach feels empty." The young man froze. Sundar stepped down from the stage, walked to him, and placed a hand on his shoulder. "I will not tell you that gratitude is easy," he said softly. "But let me tell you this. When my father gave up his dream for me, he was hungry for knowledge, yet he chose to feed me instead. When my mother gave her jewelry for my fees, she did not become richer. She became poorer. Yet, in their sacrifice, I found strength. Gratitude does not solve problems immediately, but it gives you the courage to keep fighting until solutions appear." The field fell silent. Many students wiped their eyes. Even the bold young man lowered his head, tears running down his cheeks. "I am sorry, sir," he whispered. Sundar lifted his chin gently. "Do not be sorry. Your question was brave. Questions like yours make us reflect deeper. Never stop asking hard questions, but also never forget to see the silent love around you." The tension broke and the crowd clapped loudly, not just for Sundar's words, but for the courage of the student too. Modi, who had been watching from the side, leaned toward his aide and said, "This is why his voice matters. He does not silence doubt. He turns it into hope." As the program ended, a sudden rain began to fall. Students ran for cover, but Sundar stood in the rain for a moment, letting the drops wash over him. He felt as if life was telling him, "Your journey is not about applause. It is about truth." Later that night, as he prepared to leave for his next meeting, Modi visited him again. His expression was serious. "Sundar," he said, "I want to tell you something important. Years ago, when I was still unknown, a man once told me I would never rise beyond selling tea. He said the world would not respect someone like me. I carried those words as fire in my chest. Today, when I see you, I am reminded that respect is never given easily. It is earned by gratitude and resilience." Sundar listened quietly, then said, "And now the world listens to you, not because of where you started, but because of what you carried inside." They shared a long silence, each man recognizing the other's scars. But as the night grew deeper, Sundar's phone rang again. This time it was from California. A colleague spoke with urgency. "Sundar, there is a problem. Something has gone wrong, and it may shake the trust people have in us." The words sent a chill down his spine. The peaceful days in Delhi were about to collide with a storm waiting across the ocean. The call from California left Sundar restless. The voice on the other end had carried urgency, almost fear. "Something has gone wrong, and it may shake the trust people have in us." Sundar sat still for a moment, gripping the phone tightly. He knew in the world of technology, one mistake could turn respect into doubt overnight. He walked to the balcony of his hotel. The streets below were still wet from the rain, the lamps casting reflections on the ground. His mind raced back to the students he had spoken with just hours before. They had looked at him as if he was unshakable, but now, deep inside, he felt the storm building. The next morning, he boarded a flight back to the United States. Modi had come to see him off. Before leaving, Modi said, "Storms are not there to destroy. They are there to test what you have built. Remember your own words, Sundar. Gratitude will give you direction when speed cannot." Those words stayed with him as the plane lifted into the sky. When he arrived in California, the atmosphere was tense. Reporters were outside the company building, questions flashing like the lights of their cameras. Inside, his team sat around a large table, their faces pale with worry. "Tell me everything," Sundar said calmly, though his chest was tight. A young engineer spoke first. "Sir, a security flaw was found in one of our services. Millions of users are affected. People are already calling it negligence. The media is attacking us. Governments may question our integrity." The words cut deep. Sundar closed his eyes for a moment. This was not just about technology, it was about trust, something far more fragile. "What do we do?" another manager asked, his voice trembling. "If we admit fault, we may lose face. If we stay silent, we may lose trust forever." The room was heavy with fear. Sundar opened his eyes and looked at them steadily. "We will choose trust," he said. "We will not hide. Gratitude teaches us to face truth even when it hurts. We must remember the people who gave us their trust in the first place. We owe them honesty." His words silenced the room. Some looked shocked, others relieved. Slowly, one by one, they nodded. But the real test was yet to come. Sundar stepped into the press conference the next day. The hall was packed with journalists, cameras, and flashes of light. Questions flew at him like arrows. "Was this your fault? Is your leadership failing? Do you deserve the trust of millions?" For a moment, silence filled the stage. Sundar stood tall, but inside he felt the weight of every sacrifice his family had made, every doubt he had faced. Then he spoke. "Yes, we made mistakes," he said, his voice steady. "And I take responsibility, but mistakes do not define us. How we respond does. Today I stand not to defend myself, but to honor the trust of the people who gave us a chance. We will fix this, we will learn, and we will do better. I am grateful for every user who still believes in us, and I will not take that for granted." The hall grew strangely quiet. It was not the silence of accusation, but the silence of reflection. Sundar had not spoken like a businessman. He had spoken like a human being. Later that evening, as he returned to his office, he received a message. It was from Modi. Only one line. "True greatness is not in never falling, but in rising with gratitude after every fall." Sundar stared at the message for a long time. He remembered his father's words, his mother's sacrifice, the young students in Delhi, the bold boy who had challenged him. Everything connected into one truth. Gratitude was not just for peaceful days. It was for storms like this. But as he finally leaned back in his chair, exhausted yet calm, another twist came. A colleague entered quietly and said, "Sir, there is something else. Someone inside leaked details before we could respond. It may not just be a mistake, it may be betrayal." Sundar's eyes widened slightly. This storm was far from over. The word betrayal echoed in Sundar's mind like a heavy drum. Mistakes could be fixed, storms could be faced, but betrayal, that was a wound from within. He sat in silence, staring at the floor, as the colleague repeated the words. "Sir, someone from our own team leaked the details before you spoke. The media knew too much too quickly. It was not an accident." Sundar raised his head slowly. His face showed calm, but his eyes carried weight. "Do we know who?" he asked. The colleague hesitated. "We are investigating, but we have reasons to believe it came from someone high in the chain. Someone trusted." The room felt colder than before. Sundar looked out the window at the city lights. He thought of his father's words. "You will understand the value of small things when life tests you." This was that test. Later that night, alone in his office, Sundar replayed the events in his mind. He remembered the applause in Delhi, the tears of the children, Modi's words about true greatness. And now he faced the darkest side of leadership. Doubt not from outside, but from inside. Suddenly his phone buzzed again. It was a message from Modi. Storms outside can shake walls. Storms inside can break hearts. Stay steady. Remember, greatness is proved in how you handle betrayal. Sundar read the message twice. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Appa, Amma, give me strength." The next morning, he gathered his team in the large conference hall. Their faces were tense, their voices low. Sundar stood before them and said, "I will not ask who betrayed us. I will not point fingers today. But I will remind you of something important. Every one of us is here because someone trusted us. Our families, our friends, our mentors. If we break trust, we break the very foundation we stand on." His voice grew firmer. "If mistakes happen, we will face them together. But if betrayal happens, we must heal with honesty. Gratitude means remembering the hands that lifted us. I cannot force loyalty. I can only hope gratitude will awaken it in each of you." There was silence. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some lowered their eyes. No one spoke. But later that day, an anonymous note was left on Sundar's desk. It said only one line. "I am sorry. I lost patience. I thought exposing this mistake would bring change, but now I see I broke trust. Forgive me." Sundar held the note for a long time. He did not know who had written it, but he felt the pain inside those words. Instead of anger, he felt a strange calm. He gathered his team again and read the note aloud. "The one who did this has already punished themselves with regret. I will not seek revenge. Instead, I will seek rebuilding. Because true greatness is not in punishing betrayal, but in transforming it." His words stunned the team. They expected harshness. Instead, they found forgiveness. That evening, as Sundar walked alone through the campus, he thought about the long road he had traveled. From the narrow streets of Chennai to the high towers of Silicon Valley, from rejection to respect, from doubt to gratitude. And now, even betrayal had become a teacher. He stopped by a small garden near the office. The flowers swayed in the evening wind. He remembered how his father once told him, "A flower grows even in dirt, not because the dirt is clean, but because it chooses to rise anyway." He smiled faintly and whispered, "Yes, gratitude is like that flower. It grows even in betrayal." But just as he felt peace return, his phone rang again. This time it was not California. It was Delhi. A familiar voice spoke. It was Modi. "Sundar, I need to see you again. There is something important. It is not about business. It is about India. Come soon." The call ended, leaving a new layer of mystery. What could be so urgent? Sundar felt the weight of another journey pulling him back home. When Sundar landed back in Delhi, the air was heavy with expectation. The journey from the airport to Modi's residence felt longer than usual. His heart carried questions. Why had Modi called him with such urgency? Was it about India's future? Was it something personal? Inside the quiet room, Modi was waiting. There were no cameras, no audience, just two men who had walked hard roads to reach this place. Modi looked older that day, his eyes reflecting both wisdom and fatigue. "Sundar," he began, "you spoke to the world about gratitude. You showed humility in your success and forgiveness in betrayal. But there is one more test of greatness you must face, the test of giving back." Sundar leaned forward, listening carefully. Modi continued, "Our country is full of children, like the ones who came to you that night. Brilliant minds, but with empty hands. They dream, but they lack chances. If gratitude is truly your strength, then give them what was once given to you, a chance to rise. The words struck deep. Sundar remembered the young girl who had said her father lost his job, the boy who had feared gratitude would make him weak, his own father who gave up his dream, his mother who sold her gold chain. He realized every step of his life was built not on his own strength alone, but on sacrifices of others. He looked at Modi and said softly, "Yes, I will give back. Not as a CEO, not as a public figure, but as a son of this soil." In the weeks that followed, Sundar began a program to support education in the smallest villages. Schools received books, computers, and internet access. Scholarships were created for children who could not afford fees. But more than material help, he visited the children himself, sitting on the ground with them, telling his own story of struggle and gratitude. One afternoon, in a small, dusty classroom, a boy asked him, "Sir, do you think someone like me can become like you one day?" Sundar bent down, looked him in the eyes, and said, "You do not need to become me. You need to become the best you. And yes, you can. Because greatness is not about where you start. It is about how much gratitude you carry as you climb." The children clapped. Some laughed. Some cried. Sundar saw his younger self in their faces. News of his efforts spread quickly, but Sundar never sought recognition. Whenever people tried to call it charity, he corrected them. "This is not charity. This is gratitude. I am only giving back what was once given to me." One evening, as the sun set over Delhi, Sundar sat with Modi once more. The two men watched the sky turn orange and gold. Modi spoke quietly. "When you first stood in that hall, you showed gratitude. When betrayal struck, you showed forgiveness. And now, by giving back, you have completed the circle of true greatness." Sundar lowered his head, his voice soft. "Greatness does not belong to me, sir. It belongs to everyone who gave me love when I had nothing." The silence between them carried more meaning than words. Two journeys, different but connected, had met in respect and humility. As the evening breeze touched his face, Sundar felt peace. He thought of his father's scooter, his mother's sacrifice, the rejection letters, the children in Delhi, the betrayal in California, the trust regained. Every twist, every storm, every scar, all of it had shaped one truth. True greatness was not in power, wealth, or fame. True greatness was in gratitude.